Thank you, Wendy and Karen, and lovely to see you all here today. Thank you for having me. This last year, well, I've been to England a few times, but last year I had this calling to go to the UK, and two of my children were travelling in Europe, and then we were going to meet up. And then I thought I'd go a couple of weeks early, and I'd go to the Arthur Findlay College and might do a bit of travelling. I ended up being called to the Stones. And earlier in the year, in March last year, I went and did a meditation at a place at Bondi, and I kept seeing these hooded beings around me, and they had like purple cloaks, but I could never see their face. And as time got closer to me going to the UK, these beings kept appearing to me. And I still couldn't see their faces, which was starting to distress me a little, actually, because I didn't know who they were, but they were coming quite constantly. And then part of my trip, I decided that I would go to the Callanish stones that are up in Stornoway in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. So these stones here are the Callanish standing stones, and they're on this very little island, and we were lucky enough to stay in a little pod just down the road from it. And it's wonderful because they're not like Stonehenge. You can actually walk up to them or walk around them and touch them and, sort of go up close to them. And my daughter and I, we are big Outlander fans. And so before we got there, we'd done an Outlander tour, and it was a bit of a joke, we're going to find Jamie. So when we got to the stones, we thought that as a joke really, we thought we'd touch the stones, but I was pretty shocked by what actually we both encountered. So these are the stones here. They're quite big, and a lot of the stones, the longer you stand there, the more that they start to take more like shape or human form. Some of them look like, they're quite commanding when you see them side on. These stones had been covered for many years in peat moss, and they'd been dug out over the years. And when we went up there, I put my hands onto the stones, and I was quite surprised by what happened. This is Callanish 4. There's actually 8 sets of stones there. The big one that I was at the picture here, this is Callanish 1. And if you were standing at the stones and you look to the left, you would actually see Callanish 2 and 3. So there's a lot of peat bog around them. And the other stones are probably about another kilometre away, but you'd have to drive around. But when I touched the stones, I was quite surprised because I actually felt, I should explain, I do psychometry. So from psychometry, normally I would hold a piece of jewellery, and by holding that I'd stop watching TV. In this particular form of psychometry, it's location psychometry. So when I put my hands on the stones, I started to become at one with the stones, and I started to see back into the past. From holding on to it, it was like the night sky. It became the night sky. As you can see, that it was daytime, but quite sort of cloudy. And I put my hands there, and then suddenly I realised I was going back in time, and I was in the meadow there, but there was other beings, and the hooded beings appeared again. And then to the front of the stones, which would be up around here, I could see these otherworldly beings. So I'm not saying they're UFOs, but they were other spiritual beings from another time and place. And then everything started to go, turn to night, and then I started to see these glows around the stones, and the beings had these, like, it wasn't a fire, but it's like a glow in their hands. So they were standing around the stones, and then as I looked to my left where the other stone rings are, then you could see the lights in the distance as well. And the more I touched the stones, the more I felt like I was being pulled into the stones, and kind of got a little bit, just a little bit nervous. And I pulled myself away, took my hands up, didn't say a thing to my daughter, and I said to her, "So tell me what you see if you touch the stones." And when she touched them, she saw the exact same thing as I did, which we found quite interesting. And the energy from the stones is very commanding, and even when we were staying there at night, you would feel the energies there. But we went to quite a few different of the stone rings. This one's Callanish, this one's 4. It's quite hard to get to. So if you were standing there in the distance, you would be seeing the other stones. They would be way in the distance where those little houses are. This is the stones here again. So I was a little bit disorganised. I should have had the photos sorted out better. So the Callanish stones are the biggest set of stones in the UK. That people do talk about them. They're not all that well known. They did model the Outlanders Stonehenge for the movie off these stones. They moulded them and made them out of styrofoam, and so they look very similar to that. But the energy that you feel up there is quite incredible. So this would be Callanish. I think Callanish 3. So at each of the different stones, I would, put my hands on to see what I would pick up. This is a pendant I bought when I was over there. It's actually an Outland pendant, but I wanted to just see if I could put some energy into it. So I actually charged it up on one of the stones for about 15, 20 minutes, and it ended up coming through with a lot of energy. So when I went to each of the stones, I would just hug the stone and put my hands on to see what I would receive. And each stone had different energy. The more that I visited the different stone rings, so altogether, I went to Callanish in Stornoway first, and I went to Clavercarns, which is near Culloden in Scotland. Then I went to Drombeg in County Cork in Ireland, then to the Blarney Castle, Seven Sisters stones, and there's George's Caves and Witch's Kitchen down there. Then there's another amazing place in Cornwall called Tintagel, and it's a place called St Nicholas Glen, and it has carvings there, and it also has very, very fairy-like energy. Each of the stones, when I went to them, the longer you spend with them, the more they start to morph. As you can see in this picture here, it almost looks like an old man's face. And the more that I went to different stones, each one would have different energy, but some of the energies were male, some of the energies were female. But when from the point on of going to Callanish on the very first day, the hooded beings became more and more prevalent throughout my journey. The longer I stood there, then I asked them, would they show me who they were? And they showed me that they were priestesses. So there was a group of them. They called themselves the 12. So I had this group of these 12 females around me, and one of them took her hood down, and she had the most beautiful blue eyes and white, long gossamer hair. And then some of the other women that were with her, they called themselves the green-eyed ones, and they had very bright green hair and sort of various colours of sort of reds to browns and fair kind of hair. And they were part of the priestesses to look after the stones. On another occasion, we went up to the stones, my daughter and I, and then it was actually a male energy. So I felt there was different rituals or different processions that we were seeing with the guardianship of the stones. And I felt these beings around me all the way through Scotland, which was very eye-opening, because I didn't expect for all of these things to happen. I knew that I needed to go there. My main reason was to go there was to meet the children, and also I went to the Arthur Findlay College for a week. So I thought everything was going to happen around the Arthur Findlay College, but little did I know the stones were part of the awakening and the journey. On the way up to Scotland, I went to the Awakening conference where a friend of mine, Mary Rodwell, was speaking, and there was another lady there, her name's Maria Wheatley, and she is a master dowser and geomancer, and she spoke a lot about the stones at the talk. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the talk because I was helping Mary when she was doing her presentation. Since coming back, I've made contact with Maria, and I've been undertaking some study of Druidic astrology, which has also opened up this connection with the stones, which has been very, very interesting. So it's with working with the Druidic astrology. It's a form of astrology, but it can take you back in time, and it's a bit like doing a past life connection. It's not a regression, but through looking at the different houses in your astrology, it takes you back to different time frames in life. And I was very surprised when I started to do this, that my connection again was with these stones. So it's interesting how the past can call you back from the future and reconnect you with things. Now, when we went through the UK, I'm just going to go through some pictures here for you. So when you're in Scotland, it rains quite a lot, but the wonderful thing about Scotland is you actually get the rainbows afterwards. So that was quite incredible energy, and just the powerfulness of the location is really quite wonderful. Now, this is after we left Callanish, we went down through Inverness, and by chance we went to Clavercans, which is here. And it is another sort of Stonehenge area. It's a much smaller area. It is not far from Culloden. It is very fairy-like, very, very feminine, very family-orientated. You could feel, you could hear and feel children running around and like a family energy. I could feel the fairies there. This area where I'm standing here, it used to be coated in quartz stones, and it's like a bit of a portal. That whole area is quite spread out. Not as the stones are definitely not as big as they were in the other locations, but I know this is lens flare, but it's still, you could just feel there was energy around, and it could feel being charged up. So the stones spread quite a long way around. When I was touching these stones, I actually felt a very, very calm kind of feeling, and just, it was quite different to the energy from Callanish, because Callanish has got the female energy, but it also has more of a warlike energy as well, where they could see that there was rituals, and there would have been preparation for maybe, between other tribes. But it was definitely, at times when you visited, it just depended, could be very masculine energy. When I felt the priestesses or the females there, again, they were very strong energies, and I was surprised that there were so many females. And I found each time I went to a different one of the stone circles, there was a lot of feminine energy, which isn't really spoken about. Usually we tend to think of it more as masculine energy and more priests and sort of higher beings, but I did feel the females had a lot to do, and they were working quite strongly with the stones. When I was at Callanish, one of the things that did surprise me was seeing them. At one stage I saw them putting the stones into place, and it was like they were being floated down. And they talk about the giants a lot when you go through, especially Scotland, and some of the beings there, they were very big. They would be in feet, probably 8 to 10 feet in size, maybe bigger, considering what we as human beings, or me as a human being, I'm only 5'5", so they were quite big, and it just seemed that they were quite commanding. But it's hard to put into words what I was seeing. Just having these stones floating, more or less just floating in and being positioned. Yeah, it was very crazy. Not crazy, I suppose, but it's just interesting when you're seeing these different things happening, and you start to think you're imagining it when because I'm the biggest skeptic when it comes to anything with the psychic world. I still want proof of things, and to go to the location. If someone had said to me, oh yes, I saw this and this, I'd think, okay, I'd have an open mind. But when you're actually feeling it and seeing it yourself, it's quite interesting how these things come about. So going from Callanish, and then going through to Clavercans. Then we went through quite a few other areas in Scotland. We went to Skye. There's a place called the Fairy Ring, which it's got wonderful energy, but it is man-made in this day and age. It doesn't really say that to you. You sort of do more research when you get there. So a lot of locals, there was earthquakes in the past, and so that's why all the landscape is all up and down. But it's got this incredible energy when you're there, and people bring rocks and they put them in the circle. But apparently the local farmer doesn't like that, so he clears them off and then they bring them in again. But the energy here, even I think with the intention and still these sacred geometry and symbology, it's interesting how this is something that played out through all of our visits throughout Scotland, and then going down into Cornwall, then up to Avebury. That I found it was interesting, and just sitting quietly, you could again feel there was like fairy energy up in the hillsides there. When later on we went to Ireland, and I went from Dublin, which was a bit silly, right down to the bottom of to the Drombeg stones. It was about 4.5 hours drive each way, which is a bit much, but anyway, it was interesting and well worth the drive. The stones down here are a lot smaller. This is in County Cork, and it's very much a family area. So this here is a well that still runs today. So, and it would have been like a cooking sort of area up there. But this is part of the stones, but it's quite small when you see it in reality, to see how, I'm standing there, and they're not that much. That's probably one of the taller ones that are there. The energy there was very peaceful, very calm. Had you could feel families, not, it was just, just sort of normal families there, and just felt a nice calmness. There are other stones that are not far from there. We didn't get enough time to go to everything. We went from there, though, we went to the Blarney Castle. This is a dolmen that's at the Blarney Castle in sort of the back area. And there's an area called the Druids Cave, and there's also, this is inside the Druids Cave, it had very a magical kind of energy. And then there's the Witch's Kitchen and the Witch's Stone. So a lot of people, the Witch's Kitchen's not far from there. There's a stone ring there, and it's called the Seven Sisters. Again, it's not a very tall stone ring, but it did feel very feminine to me. The ones where the stones, some of the stones had fallen over, and there's a folklore about the stones, how the family had lost the seven sisters and one of the brothers had passed. This area, to me, of course, you could touch it. It felt very commercial compared to, I would have to say, Callanish and Avebury were my favourite areas to go to. From when we went there, I've been to a place, it's called Tintagel. I'd been there before. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was going to see the Northern Lights, and one of my clients, the day before I left, he said, because I was going to England for a few days, and he said, "Are you going to Tintagel?" I didn't even know where Tintagel was, and I had a few days free, so we decided to drive down there. And this area is very well connected to King Arthur and Merlin. So down there, there's these beautiful falls called the St Nectan's Glen, but there's also carvings, and it's a very magical place. And there's a cave called Merlin's Cave. So the whole town is sort of evolved around the Arthurian, myths and history. But the energy in this area is very, very, again, connected to being very fairy-like. So each of the areas I went to, I'd sort of touch things to see what I would find. And when I went to this location, I was really, it's just so magical and cleansing. You sort of go down into like a little glen, and then you walk up, and I can't explain it. This is one of the areas that I've been to now twice, and I've dreamt about it and the stones ever since I've been there. My daughter, I kept telling her about it, and she had the same connection. When I came back from England the first time, I got my DNA done, not just because my mum wanted to get hers done, and she said to me, "Well, why don't you get yours done, and we'll see what you've got." And I make sterling silver jewellery, like angel jewellery, and every time I would make the jewellery, I would be going back to Cornwall in my head as though I was a silversmith, and I thought that was a bit strange. But then I got my DNA back, and I had 69% of my DNA came from Cornwall area, so I feel like it was a bit of a calling from a past life to take me back there. But there's all these sort of areas that are very ethereal and connecting. So it's like the location psychometry again. It touches your soul, and you can feel it. There's just beautiful. I haven't got all the photos here, sorry, but it's just these beautiful sort of feeling and energy of the place. Not far from there's an area called Rock Valley Labyrinth, rock carvings, and you walk down into a gully, and there's an old stone mill there, and then these images, again with the sacred geometry, just sort of appear on the rocks. They're not very big, they're probably about 30 centimetres across. But the reason I'm showing you these different images, I'll explain a little bit in a minute about the things that I saw when I went to Avebury. So this is all part of down there, the energy, as you can see, and I know it's lens flare, but on the phone, it was like flashing back and forth. So there was lots of energy going on around there. Yeah. So from going to there, we went to Glastonbury, and we just were there overnight. and the energy there again, and the connection to King Arthur, and the ley lines is very strong. So again, when we went up the top there, we could feel the energy. Oh, sorry, that was too quickly. Apologise. Oh, they're out of order. Sorry. So these are the two rock carvings that are in at Tintagel at the Rock Valley Labyrinth. So they're just these two tiny little drawings. No, not drawings, it's carvings. But it was funny. They kept coming up to me throughout the trip. And on our second, it was a second last day together with my son and my daughter, we had only an hour at Avebury because I had to drop my son at the airport. We didn't time anything very well, but I had this most incredible experience. So we were walking around and I kept feeling the stones calling me, and some of the stones again were turning into faces and sort of doing, different things. I'm sorry, my children have the photos on their phones, but the whole avenue there of Avebury, it's huge. You need to probably spend at least a week there, and I wished I had have. But what I did is I started at one of the stones, and then the stone started to call me, and so I decided that I would put my hand on the stone to see what would happen. And then suddenly the frequency of the stone shifted, and I put my hand onto the stone, and as I did, each stone had a different frequency, and I started to get all this symbology. So the symbology of those, like the labyrinth that I saw, that was one of the things coming out of the stone. So some of the stones, when you touch them, the frequency would be coming outwards as though it was coming around me and wrapping around me. Then other ones, it was like I was being pulled into like a portal. There was others that were actually like a circular vortex going clockwise, then going anti-clockwise. So I had all of these different energies that were happening, and the frequency of energy was getting faster and faster. It was almost like a heartbeat kind of feeling that I was picking up from the stones. And so I'd go to the next stone and I'd feel it. I didn't get to do all of the stones. I didn't have enough time, but I was probably there. I'd probably spend 5 or 10 minutes with each stone, and then I'd sort of move to the next one. So I did about 12, probably 12 stones. And I was quite surprised by each one. I would see different beings connected to the stones. And then some of the portals, some of them would be square. And I ended up channeling all of these different symbols, and I wrote them all down. And it was just really interesting to see how they came through. But unfortunately, when I came home on the plane, I lost my notebook, and I lost the book that I channeled, but I still have all the images in my mind. So I'm actually trying to work on writing them up and doing maybe a deck of oracle cards or something to connect with them, because I found each different symbol had a different connection to life and different ways into spirit. It's hard to explain. I've never ever, look, I've been channeling for quite some time, but I've never really experienced anything like this before. And ever since I've been to the stones, it's like it's just part of me now. And it was interesting, since I've come back, I ended up having a really sore neck. My right side of my neck, I've ended up with a crushed disc, and the left side of my neck, I have a pinched nerve. And then I started doing this Druidic astrology, as I mentioned earlier. And then it took me back, and it showed me that I was a priestess at the stones. And I was part of these beings that I keep seeing. And when I was working with Maria was saying to me that in Scotland and England, they didn't always burn witches. They would actually hang them. And I thought how interesting that could be, because since coming back from the stones, the right side of my neck has been giving me a terrible time, and they actually want to operate, which I'm not gonna have done. But so I felt that this was a connection to my past life, and I've been channeling a lot of information from these beings. But part of them, I think, connecting now is that they want to work with us in the future, and us about reconnecting to the world and to nature. And I think it's important for us sometimes too, I think, to connect with the past, to sort of solve things from the past, to understand our past so that we can work with it in our future. But it's interesting how you have people come into your life that you were connected to in a past life. Like I've been under hypnosis many times for police cases, and even for I've had a past life regression, but I've never had anything like this before. And I just think this is another way spirit is coming through to us now. They were saying to me, it's important that we start to reconnect and to understand and work together, because there's significant changes going on around the world at the moment. And it's funny, there's the more and more people I seem to speak with while I'm doing readings, a lot of people seem to be having these awakenings and these downloads of information. And I think maybe we need to pay a bit more attention to different parts, of our world, or different places we're drawn to. So, like, I never thought that I would want to go to Scotland, because I don't really like cold places. But since I've been there, I just absolutely love it. It's like it's part of my soul. And even down into Tintagel, into Cornwall. And each time I do this druidic course, I end up having more and more visions of the past life from the stones. I had a vision of being out in a field, and I was walking in the field, and then this the sky went dark again, but this great big, it was big craft came above me. It was like a great big triangle, and it was like a gunmetal grey, and it had a circle underneath it, and then it had another circle inside with a blue light. And I was hiding under a dolmen, and then it flew over and it left. And I thought, how this is all just so bizarre, but it just seems to be it's like a jigsaw puzzle for me. I'm getting more and more pieces. So I feel that the stones were a catalyst for me to have this connection to the past. And even with the photos, I just absolutely loved being there and just feeling them. But I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to go to the stones, but there may be somewhere in your life where you're drawn to, whether it's the Arizona desert, or is there an area that you're drawn to, because I think it's a way of connecting to our spirit guides and, our past life areas in life, because I do feel that we are very connected. It's another area that I went to here in Australia called Hanging Rock. There was a movie many years ago called Picnic at Hanging Rock, and there's a lot of myth and legend about this particular location. It's out in the country in Victoria, and it's this great big rock, and it just sort of comes up out of nowhere. And I went to it when I was about 18, and it was rainy, and the myth or the story is that these girls went up to the top of the rock, and then they went missing. There's 3 of them that were never found. And the lady who wrote the book, she had another ending, and it wasn't to be released till after she died. So now nobody really knows if it was true or not, but it definitely is a portal when you get there. You get to the very top of it, and it's very closely connected to the Australian Indigenous, Aboriginals. And when you stand there long enough, again, the same sort of energy that I picked up with the stones was happening to me at Hanging Rock. The rocks started to have faces. You could start to hear the whispering. You could start to feel things, just like I did when I was at the stones over in the UK. You can hear them talking to you, and it's like you become part of it, or as one. And I really think that there's a lot to be said for this type of energy, but it's also a reminder for us to get outside. I think, travel's wonderful, but you don't always have to travel overseas. But I do feel that part of nature is trying to come and talk to us, and I feel it's trying to awaken us again to who we were and who we could be or shall be. So I think it's a really important time for us just to reconnect. And I think it's wonderful with Karen and Wendy doing these events, because it's getting like-minded people and, everybody finding their tribe and starting to reconnect and sharing their experiences. It just seems very important to me at this time in the world, really.